Inside the stories that affect you. This is Inside KELOLAND.
Good evening. I'm Angela Kennecke. Thanks for joining us. On this week's Inside KELOLAND, we want to keep the conversation going on race relations in America and right here in KELOLAND. With new developments every day on the investigation into George Floyd's death and the protests across the world, we want to let you know that this show was recorded on Thursday afternoon. Last week, the Sioux Falls Downtown Rotary Club hosted a virtual conversation between business owner Vonnie Harari and Sioux Falls Police Lieutenant John Toome. Both focused on how to strengthen race relations in the community and unite against racism. Both men hope we will have discussions like this.
How do we create a system where when we hold our officials accountable, it's not seen as an attack, right? It's just prudence from a citizen.
But the more important conversations are the ones they're going to have between neighbors, friends, and families about their role in this moving forward.
And that is what we'd like to do now. We are joined by Lieutenant Jason Leash with the Sioux Falls Police Department, Ty Rushing, the managing editor of the Northwest Iowa Review, and Pastor Joshua Duncan of the Center of Life Church in Sioux Falls. Thank you all for being here with us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
And we have now seen several weeks of protests demanding justice for George Floyd, calls for defunding police departments, and donations pouring into organizations that deal with injustice and inequality. What do you think makes this movement different than in years past? And do you think change will actually happen this time and not just more lip service? Ty, let's start with you.
Okay, I think kind of like what's been different this time around is, 2020 has been rough. Like, it's been rough for everyone. And so having everything that happened since George Floyd on top of everything else that's happened. And plus, when you think about the past atrocities, man, it was kind of like a boiling point, and people were just ready for a change, and they're ready to help lead that change and promote that and fight for it even.
As I'm observing, Angela, the change is what makes it so different. I think, of course, there's many times where there's videos where people have viewed it, but I think something about this video pricked the hearts of everyone, not just here in the United States, but globally. And I feel like everyone felt the sorrow to watch somebody die. And that opens up a door for many people to question there is something that needs to be changed. So I feel like now what makes this different is that there's a level of empathy that people are developing as opposed to times past where there was so much other things around, the kneeling of the flag that brought up a lot of controversy. But there was a blatant line that people saw where somebody lost their life that didn't have to due to the police brutality that everybody witnessed through that video.
Lieutenant Leach, what is it like to be a police officer during this time?
Well, I think being a police officer over the years has become more challenging. In my 16 years now with the Sioux Falls Police Department, I've seen changes over that time, and our job keeps getting more difficult with added tasks from the community that are expectations from the community as well of the police department. And I think our department locally here has done a great job responding to those additional duties and changes and requests. But then also, I think for us to look at our own circumstances here in Sioux Falls through a unique lens, not applying the lens of Minneapolis or Chicago or Denver or Seattle to what we have here in Sioux Falls currently.
Let's talk about racism and the direct experience of it in our communities we call KELOLAND. Pastor Duncan, let's start with you here in Sioux Falls, which is 85% white.
Mm-hmm. I grew up here, Angela. I've been here since I was 2. We moved here I'm from Des Moines. We were talking about earlier where, the Iowa connection. And so growing up in Sioux Falls, gosh, up until I was in the 4th grade, I was the only Black kid in my class. And so oftentimes when, Black History Month came around or Martin Luther King came around day, my classmates looked at me and you talk about microaggressions, experiencing, kids wanting to touch my hair, or, I was the token Black guy in the class, in the neighborhood I grew up in the McKinnon Park area. with 6 brothers and sisters, predominantly the only Black family in the block. Oftentimes when we would have relatives over and we were just hanging out, listening to music, the police would get called on us just for hanging out on our own porch. And so those are some of the things I experienced growing up in Sioux Falls. And just, I think mostly, through high school, a friend of mine saying, you talk differently. And to my question was, well, how am I supposed to talk? How am I supposed to sound? So just those are the type of things I experienced growing up in this area, in the KELOLAND area.
And Ty, you live in Northwest Iowa. I'm not sure what the percentage white there is. It seems like it might even be higher than in Sioux Falls.
It is. I think like the Black population in Sheldon is like 0.89%.
Oh my goodness. What is that like for you moving from out of state, right?
Yeah. So I'm from Kansas City originally, the Kansas side, and I've been in Iowa for 7.5 years now. And I started in Central Iowa, and then I came to Northwest Iowa in 2014 for my first opportunity here at the Review as a staff writer. And yeah, no, it was a definite night and day difference. You noticed that a lot. And I can recall the first time I came up for my job interview. It was October 2014. And I got here about an hour early because it was a 4-hour drive from Newton to Shelburne. And I had some time to kill, so I went to the public library. And I went over to the area where some gentlemen were reading newspapers because, I was interviewing for a newspaper job. So I kind of wanted to see some of the products myself. And I was just like so nervous and like, just like, kind of like, oh man, what's going on here? Like, am I going to get this? Like, I heard it's good paper. Like, I want this opportunity. And, because I'm coming for a job interview, I'm dressed really nicely, black slacks, black shirt, sweater vest, all that kind of thing. And I'm just sitting there talking to the gentleman. And I'm like, hey, do you guys know where I can get a good cup of coffee? And none of them said anything to me, like not a single word. And then one of them actually got up and moved with his newspaper. And I was like, oh, okay. I don't know do I really want this job? And, because like that was my first impression of the community. And it's changed a lot in the time since then. Like I said, I came back to the company 2 years ago, and like I walk around town and everyone's, hey Ty. A lot of people know me. I built a lot of strong connections, a lot of strong relationships. I remember one time in 2016, I had the wife of an O'Brien County supervisor come, pull me to the side at an event and was just telling me, she was like, meeting you has changed my husband's perspective on race a lot. And she told me a story about how their daughter brought a Black guy home one time and did not go well. And so, and then I was kind of shocked because like I had never gotten that vibe from him. He always joked around and all that kind of stuff. And she said, just meeting you, to know you, reading your stuff, reading your content, reading your columns has like really, changed his worldview. And like, and that kind of just blew my mind, to hear that. It's just like, dang, like, I've written about this before, but like, I think sometimes that osmosis effect of like actually meeting a Black person and getting to know them, you can be like, oh, wow, they're not so different. I mean, they're a little chocolate, but that's it. Like we're the same. And I think that helps a lot of people.
It's really hard to hate people up close. And it sounds like both of you have seen changes over the years, but have we come far enough?
I think, the key part, it's a journey. And I think as far as if we've come far enough, it all depends on the willingness of people to continue to learn other people's story. As Ty was saying, the minute the person understood his story, there's a level of empathy, which a bridge was built for people to cross over and meet in the middle. I think Sioux Falls has come a long way. When we first moved here in the 80s, the question when people found out we lived here was there any Black people that lived there?
Pastor Duncan, I don't mean to interrupt you, but when I first moved here, I did a story about the number of Black, that was 30 years ago. There were 700 Black people living in Sioux Falls. We'll never forget that number. So go ahead with what you were saying.
Yeah, so it's changed, so helping people to hear people's story, and most definitely it's come a long way. But I think some of the challenges are continuing to fight that fear that people have of the fear of difference, the difference in skin color, the difference in socioeconomic status, the difference of, what if my kid's with this kid, and not, the fear of the unknown. So I think that is one thing when you talk about fighting race in culture and things like that. I think it still has that distance to go to help us to not have terrible things that we've seen in Minneapolis and St. Louis and all those other states.
Well, and obviously nationwide, we have a long ways to go. Earlier this week, Sioux Falls Mayor Paul Tenhaken tweeted, "The dialogue of defunding the police will not be part of our conversation. Our administration is working toward realistic solutions with lasting impact, not political puffery." Now, we want to hear your thoughts on defunding police departments. Lieutenant Leach, we're going to start with you on this one.
Yes, thank you for that. Chief Burns and Mayor Tenhaken have both gone out on this topic as well, and I've been very clear about that, that defunding the police department is just going to reduce services to the city of Sioux Falls and to the residents of Sioux Falls. So maybe we can focus better on some of those shining stars that we have in the city right now, like our school resource officer program, our community resource officer program, which also focuses on our community ambassador program, which brings 12 unique members to the table from community groups throughout the city of Sioux Falls and the surrounding area to have just that community conversation. So those type of programs that we're doing right now and that we want to continue to grow and see flourish, our partnership with the Sioux Falls School District and our 7 different school districts that we serve in the city of Sioux Falls as the Sioux Falls Police Department has never been stronger. We're active in those schools. We're making relationships with those kids, and that's important. Our youth is our future, and so making those connections early, having a positive interaction with police officers is vital to our success and seeing this forward.
Yeah, I think that positive interaction is key. Ty and Joshua, I want to give you a chance to respond to your thoughts about how people feel about the police right now and the question of defunding them.
I think that's important, like what he said, like having that, those positive interactions and that communication between officers and the communities that they are there to serve and protect. I think that can go a long way. You got to kind of get those bonds established. You kind of got to get those tethers attached, because a lot of people, like, I'm from Kansas City. Like, I had no idea who my local police officers were. And when I saw them, I'm like, oh God, what's happening? What's going on? And then as I moved to smaller and smaller communities, I noticed that, people there, they're connected to they know their police officers by name. They know who they are. The officers, they're part of the community. They're involved there. They grew up there, or they moved in and, got themselves quickly acclimated and things like that. And so people had that familiarization with them. And that's helped with a lot of those interactions. I mean, Mike Anderson, he retired from O'Brien County as a sheriff a couple of years ago. He is the longest serving sheriff in Iowa's history. I believe 42 years. You can double check that later. And, I talked to him, I've interviewed him. And one thing that always struck out to me is that he said, I can count the number of times on one hand that I've had to pull my service weapon in the line of duty. And he said, it's all about communication. He said, if you talk to a person the right way, communicate with them, get them to understand where you're coming from and try to understand their point of view, you can solve so many problems. And that's stuck with me ever since. And most of the officers I talk to for interviews and things like that, they reiterate the same things. I mean, like Sheldon, we have a pretty strong and solid Shop Like a Cop Foundation, in which officers take low-income children and take them take them out to get school supplies and new school clothes. And last year I was a volunteer for that, just because, like, I also believe in that, like that communication and, being able to put that, like, if you want to see change and you want to see people work together and do better, you also got to be a part of that and be willing to put yourself out there as well. And so, I agree. Like, we need that communication. We need people to understand each other and to understand each other's perspectives, because, like, that gets lost a lot of the time.
Pastor Duncan?
I have to agree. Understanding people's perspectives helps to build that bridge again of empathy. If people don't understand story, whether or understand where someone's coming from, when you approach a situation, you're going to approach a situation with a bias, with your own preconceived notions or assumptions. So I think that education piece for police officers, opportunities to continue to strengthen relationships with the communities, it's the Black community, since that's what we're talking about, and helping to make sure that there's a clear line of communication, and with the community to partner and also, or have the ability to challenge when things aren't in line, or there's situations that would cause doubt, and are they here to serve and protect? I think having those opportunities to create that forum of also support for the police officers and the community leaders that are connected, so that Sioux Falls at least can have a healthy community. So healthy relationships, healthy open communication, and the ability to respond with a voice, so that we can stay the community and continue to progress as a community as a whole.
I think to talk with Pastor Duncan there, that's perfect. He touches right on our mission statement for the Sioux Falls Police Department. It's partnering with the community to serve, protect, and promote quality of life. So basically, I mean, this is a community issue that we all need to gather around and all work together on. This is not just a police issue. A lot of it's focused on that, but it is a community issue, and we want to partner with the community to be out there, be more visible, and increase our messaging with the community. So we're not filling our community here in KELOLAND and Sioux Falls metro area with lenses from other communities that maybe aren't the same as ours, aren't the same relationships that have been built over the years with a lot of hard work from a lot of people in the community.
Yeah, and I have to say openness and transparency is more important than ever right now. We do have to take a quick break. We will be right back. Welcome back to Inside KELOLAND. As we keep the conversation going on race relations right here in KELOLAND, we are joined by Pastor Joshua Duncan, Ty Rushing, and Lieutenant Jason Leach. Thank you so much for being here. I have been reporting on white supremacist activity in KELOLAND for several years now, including stickers that were just posted in Brookings ahead of that city's peaceful protest. Let's talk about why these groups are still around, why they have a presence here. Pastor Duncan, can we start with you about what you think? Have you seen the activities of these groups?
I guess personally, I haven't seen anything. You know, I think when this all happened, you know, there was the racial slur painted at the falls. Oftentimes, I think they're still around because, you know, as long as there's a devil in hell, there's always going to be hate. There's always going to be fear. There's always going to be people that want to continue to perpetuate separation. Hundreds of years this has been going on as far as those type of groups in some type of form. So I think that sometimes comes with the fight of trying to bring people together in racism to unify Black and white people and people of all different backgrounds. But as long as, you know, they have a voice, they're going to keep on speaking, as I've observed.
Lieutenant Leach, there are reportedly 4 of these hate groups organized in South Dakota. Has Sioux Falls seen activity?
We have had a couple of the stickers placed throughout the downtown area. It spread out over the last couple months. They were moved right away. We did have a banner hung over I-229 last month, and that was removed right away as well. And it's that partnership with the community that when somebody sees something, they say something. They let us know that that's going on, and then we can address it and deal with it. But other than that, we have not seen a presence of that here.
What about Northwest Iowa, Ty? What do you see there with these hate groups?
I've seen nothing in real life. I mean, you know, you see some of the comments on social media. You alluded to that as well. Like on Facebook, like, man, Facebook is just
can be nasty. Nasty. Yeah.
I mean, the closest thing I could think to of like actual real life activity was a couple of months ago. Someone did some graffiti in Rock Valley, and when we wrote the story, we said swastika-like instead of swastika, because the people who did it didn't actually paint the swastika correctly. And people got mad at us for saying swastika-like. And it's like, well, it's not actually a swastika. Like, they were trying for that, but they didn't succeed. So that's why we said it that way. But yeah, so like I said, yeah, most of the stuff is digital, but like, I know the roots of it are there. I mean, the largest public gathering in Sheldon was a Klan march. So like, yeah, that was fun history. I also learned about that, like, after I was already in place. And I was like, oh, okay.
Well, I like how you kind of handle some of that with humor, and maybe it helps for all of us to laugh a little bit together because it's such a serious issue, and we can maybe come together through that kind of laughter. We do have to take a break, but when we come back, I want to talk about more than just overt racism. I want to talk about subtle racism and institutionalized biases. Well, we have been having a conversation about racism, and we were talking about overt hate groups or white supremacist groups, but I also want to talk about more subtle forms of racism, or how we see it in our institutions and our culture. I am joined by Ty Rushing, Lieutenant Jason Leach, and Pastor Joshua Duncan. Whichever one of you wants to start tackling that question.
There you go. So, I guess a friend of mine's girlfriend put it the best way possible, and I wish I thought of this quote, but she said, institutional racism is so strong in America that when you protest it, people act like you're protesting America, and that really stuck with me. And here's a little homework for everyone. It's so subtle, and it's just so out there. Google the origins of Aunt Jemima pancake mix or Uncle Ben rice, and you'll just kind of get a taste of it. No pun intended.
No, I understand what you're saying. Pastor Duncan.
I would say, can you repeat the question again, please? Sorry.
Just about the more subtle forms of racism, or even institutionalized racism, cultural racism within this country. How does that show up for you?
I think how that shows up for me is, when people, say a comment, about let me touch your hair, or just stuff that they have no maybe knowledge about. And I would say, I think that plays on the ignorance of lack of cultural awareness. I believe if people can study or educate themselves on just those basics of do's and don'ts, I think that would help to eliminate institutional racism. I think that's the beginning piece of tearing that down. Education, but I also think a heart change. Also think is huge. People doing a self-reflection of what's in my heart and how do I see the person? Do I see them as myself?
Lieutenant Leach, what goes on within the police force? Is there any kind of special education or training to try to bring that awareness of how biases may exist?
Yeah, so we've done some implicit bias training here at the police department as well, and it's just making people aware of what they don't know as well, or what maybe they're perceiving. And officers, we train the officer safety and awareness, but we have to be constantly reevaluating situations. We can't just go into one situation with a preconceived notion. We have to go into that situation and be able to change with that situation and work with what we're presented with at that time. So it not coming into it with preconceived notions, but then also being able to adapt to our surroundings and change. I mean, that situation can be a very positive encounter.
All right, well, thank you so much. I feel like we're just at the tip of the iceberg with this conversation. We have so much to talk about. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I want to thank all of you for joining us today, and stay with us. We'll be right back. That's all the time we have for this week's Inside KELOLAND. I want to thank all of our guests for helping us to continue the conversation on race relations in KELOLAND. Have a good night, everyone.